Wonder Woman 1984, otherwise known as WW84, has finally hit theaters and streaming after what seems like an infinite number of delays when it was supposed to come out a lot earlier. So it's finally here, but is it any good? Let's talk about it. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Hope y'all are doing well. Hope everyone's taking care of themselves. And thank you for stopping by and checking out my review of Wonder Woman 1984. So this movie is the sequel to 2017's Wonder Woman, a surprise hit among audiences. I didn't care too much for a Wonder Woman movie to begin with. She was never really one of my favorite characters, but the movie was pretty decent. I don't remember a ton about the movie, if I'm being completely honest. I didn't love it as much as a lot of other people did, but I thought it was a fine addition to the DCEU, or is it Worlds of DC now? I thought it was a good movie up until the kind of terrible third act.
And I believe in love.
Then I will destroy you!
So, I wasn't really sure what to expect going into this sequel. It was directed by Patty Jenkins, who I believe she was in charge of the first one as well, right? It's written by her and Jeff Johns. And I mean, the movie, if you've been paying attention to any news lately, the movie hasn't been getting a lot of positive reviews. I went into it a little bit cautious as a result. Honestly, walking out of it, it's kind of a letdown. The movie is not that great. Now, I'm going to keep this mostly spoiler-free, but to talk about some of the stuff that I really do want to talk about, I have to discuss spoilers. So I'll keep the spoiler free, and I'll make sure to clearly label somewhere that I'm talking about spoilers once I start. Let's get the best thing about this movie out of the way, the score. Hans Zimmer's score is marvelous. It's one of the best scores he's composed in a long time, I have to say. I found the score to be thrilling. I found the score to elevate a lot of scenes that would have otherwise just been average or slightly above average at best. There was a lot of attention to detail when it came to the score. It fit so much of the movie. A lot of scenes that even I didn't care for the scenes themselves, the score elevated them, made me care about them. There's a lot to like, about the movie, but there's also really a lot to dislike. For every great thing, there's a couple of bad things. Essentially what this movie boils down to, the core conflict, is just being a hero or being the good guy without taking any shortcuts, without staying true to yourselves, keeping honor to yourself. It makes no sense. Keeping honor to yourself. What the fuck? And we see characters in this movie struggle with that conflict, staying true to yourself. We have Diana, her core conflict. This isn't a spoiler. It's been in every trailer, but Steve Trevor's back. And her conflict kind of revolves around him. Again, that's going into spoilers a bit, which I can cover later. But we have Barbara, played by Kristen Wiig, otherwise known as Cheetah. Everyone knows that. She kind of has her own insecure conflict going on. We have Maxwell Lord, who I thought he was the biggest surprise of the movie for me. I did not think I was going to care about Maxwell Lord at all. And even though he's far from perfect in this movie, pretty good. Pedro Pascal does a pretty damn good job. I think we're all used to not seeing the dude's face on The Mandalorian.
This is the way.
He's a good actor, and he really does play Maxwell Lord as well as the script lets him. He kind of goes over the top towards the end of the third act, and it's kind of falls apart a little bit, but I thought Maxwell Lord was a pretty decently written villain. But there's just so much that drags this movie down. This movie is 2.5 hours long. It does not need to be 2.5 hours long. It did not. You could have easily told this story in 1 hour 45, maybe 2 hours if you're feeling generous. There's a lot of fat that could have been trimmed, a lot of just fluff. For example, between Diana and Steve, there's just a lot of unnecessary fluff between those two characters that take up so many scenes. There's just a lot that didn't need to be there. The movie is not very focused. When the movie is telling its core story and just telling its core story and not concerning itself with filler, not concerning itself with these subplots and such, it can be enjoyable. Because even then, the core conflict in this movie does feel very forced. There's so many cliches. We'll go back to Kristen Wiig's character, the Cheetah. Before she becomes the Cheetah, she's just a regular person named Barbara Minerva. She's an insecure, she's socially anxious, this and that, and it's just the movie kind of hits you over the head with every cliche that anxious people go through. And not to discount it, of course, but in a movie, you want this story to be believable. I mean, you don't want, it's almost as if the film is just spoon feeding you reasons to care about its characters. Even Maxwell Lord, who I said I enjoyed watching him, you don't really care about his character at all. I mean, speaking for myself, the movie gives him a little bit of backstory towards the beginning when he's introduced, and then again a little bit towards the very end of the movie, but it's never enough to really get behind this guy and be like, yeah, I care. The basic plot is there's a stone, right? The dream stone or whatever it's called, that grants the user a wish but takes away something in return. Something you can start to piece together where the conflict kind of rises. Well, you get what you want, but you lose something in return. You know, Diana gets Steve back, but essentially kind of loses her powers in a sense as a result. Barbara gets a wish she makes, but I mean, as you can probably predict, becomes a cheetah. It's a lot of trade-offs, and I do think that the story being told is pretty decent. I think there's a good movie hidden in this mess somewhere. I like the idea of having to wrestle between what you want and what you need and staying true to yourself. I do like the threads that form some sort of a beating heart in the film. It's just, unfortunately, there's just so much forced dialogue. There is so much exposition, and even not enough exposition when you need it. You never really know how Pedro Pascal's character, you never really know how Maxwell Lord even knows about this mythical, godlike dreamstone to begin with. I mean, there's so many leaps in logic. There's so many just jumps that you have to take as an audience to be like, oh, okay, I guess they're not going to tell us about this. So look, I want to get into spoilers soon because I keep dancing around things I want to say. So all in all, I mean, go into this movie, definitely don't expect anything cohesive, anything fluid. Expect a messy, overlong, yet somewhat enjoyable sequel. It's not a terrible film. I mean, I've heard people bashing the ever-living hell out of this movie, but it's not terrible. There are enjoyable parts to the movie. There is just way many more elements that are not very enjoyable. So, this is your spoiler warning. This is your turnaround, unless you don't care, but I'm going to talk about some spoilers here. So the Dreamstone, kind of, you have your three main characters, right? We have Diana, we have Barbara, and we have Maxwell Lord. Maxwell is an oil miner. What's the word? I don't know. He works with oil. He's a failing father. I mean, this guy's humiliated. He has low self-esteem, this and that. He uses the Dreamstone. He essentially wants to become the Dreamstone. Don't ask me how that works because the movie never explains how that works, but whatever. Becomes the Dreamstone and kind of grants people their wishes, but he feeds off of what is taken away from them, in a sense, if that makes any sense. His conflict, again, I was into. I just wish we had more to chew on. You know, early on, you kind of see that his son, or he thinks his son sees him as a joke, and you know, that comes back at the end where he reconciles with his son and this and that, and you get some backstory, but it's just never enough. You have Barbara, who's insanely envious of Diana, who's essentially like, I want to become like her, I want to be like her, and all pretty and sexy, and then she becomes that. Later on is like, oh, you know what, I just want to be an apex predator. Her characterization, I thought, I was with it, but again, there's, in a 2.5 hour movie, you would expect a lot more characterization. You would expect them to flesh out the villains. The villains, there's 2 villains in this movie, even though Cheetah's just a puppet for Maxwell Lord in the end, but you expect them to flesh out these characters that you're supposed to be so invested in, but they don't. Steve Trevor, the way he comes back, I thought the Dreamstone would be like, just bring him back, himself. But his soul comes back in a random guy's body, and Diana essentially just seduces this random guy who she sees as Steve. But I mean, when you think about it, the logistics of how their relationship in this movie works is kind of weird. Best not to dwell on it for too long. That part of the movie too, I didn't really care for. It just dwelled too much on this sappy love stuff and not enough on the core conflict of, look, I love you, but I'm losing my powers because you're here. Of course, that conflict comes up towards the end of the film when Diana has to make her hard decisions. But the point of all this is just that this movie is it's just not focused at all. It's a 2.5 hour movie, and it could have, look, if you want to keep the runtime, keep the runtime. I'm down with the 2.5 hour movie. I mean, I've watched longer movies, but why does it need to be as long as it is? There's so many scenes of Wonder Woman just flying. I mean, like, come on. I was never a huge Wonder Woman fan, so maybe I'm just missing the appeal, but I didn't care for a single one of those flying scenes. Granted, the score was very good, but I didn't care. I did not care at all. I'm just like, can we get back to the stuff that is supposed to be dragging, like, is supposed to be keeping this movie going forward? And so much of the plot is just furthered by dialogue, not by natural flow of events, by cliches, by coincidences, by things that just happen. Again, so many leaps in logic, so many just dumb moments that really tarnish the movie, and it sucks because I wanted to like it. I mean, I kind of liked the whole vibe they were going for with the 80s setting, which they don't really ever take full advantage of, in my opinion. I really thought that in a shorter, more cohesive film, this core conflict of wants versus needs and honor and staying true to yourself, I thought this could have made for a very compelling conflict between Wonder Woman and Maxwell Lord. At the end, when after she gets everyone to renounce their wish and gets him to renounce his wish, she just like lets him go. I mean, yay, he gets to see his son, I guess, but like, why does she let him go? I mean, there's just so much that you're gonna have to put up with. You know what I mean? Not a terrible movie. I wouldn't pay to go see it, honestly. I mean, if you have HBO Max, watch it. But just expect another kind of dud from DC. I mean, they're so, kind of speak for DC as a whole, they're just so disjointed with their filmography. I mean, they for every good movie they make, they gotta make a bad one. I mean, Aquaman was enjoyable. I like the ultimate cut of Batman vs. Superman. Snyder cut of Justice League is hopefully going to be our Lord and Savior. They're good movies, but there's some stinkers too. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, the more that I do like parts of Wonder Woman 84, I mean, the parts that I like have grown on me. I do like the core conflicts, but I just wish a movie made us care more. That's it. That's the movie's problem at the end of the day. It asks us to follow along, and it asks us to be invested in what's going on, just without all the characterization that you would expect in a 2.5-hour movie. So yeah, Wonder Woman 84. Did you see it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the video. And I appreciate you guys watching. Just wanted to give my thoughts on this movie, give my 2 cents. And yeah, until next time, guys. Peace out.